Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first episode of the 90's Nut Podcast. My name is Lance Madewell, and I'm here to guide you through everything that has to do with the last great decade, whether it be movies, music, TV shows, pop culture in general. You will hear it right here on the 90's Nut. Now, once again, my name is Lance Madewell. I like to define myself as a huge nostalgia nerd. I'm just trying to recreate my version of the American dream, and you guys will be able to hear all about that right here on the 90's Nut. I decided for my first episode, what better topic to do than movies. I'm a huge movie fan. Ask me anything about movies. Actually, ask me anything about pop culture in general, especially with the 90's, and I will be able to try my best to, answer any questions anybody has. So, like I said, first episode, I wanted to do something special with movies, and I figured I would go with a very special thing about 90s cinema that is very near and dear to my heart, and that would be the Askew-niverse films, Kevin Smith's multi-film series that has to deal with many different topics. Some movies are very comedic, some of them are very serious, and just overall, it's probably one of my best. I wouldn't say best. I would say probably my favorite series of film. Before the MCU, there was the Askew-niverse. So, Marvel, you guys weren't there first. I'm pretty sure Kevin Smith is marking out about the fact that he was able to have an expanded film universe was definitely an inspiration for some people. I know most people do it now for the money. You got DC that's struggling, and that's sad. And, they had the dark universe that Universal tried starting with that horrible Mummy reboot, or as I believe they said it on Honest Trailers, Tom Cruise runs from sand featuring the Mummy. So anyway, I'm going to go through every single Askew-niverse film, talk about different things about it, my favorite parts of it, and then at the end I will actually rank the Askew-niverse movies personally. So first up, it all started in 1994 with Mallrats. Kevin Smith used to work at the Quick Stop in New Jersey. I've actually visited there a couple times. It's over in Leonardo, and it's actually a very surreal experience if you go there a couple times. If you are a Kevin Smith film fan, I would definitely suggest you check that place out. So he used to work there during the day, and he wanted to make films. So what happened is he maxed out a whole bunch of credit cards and stuff, because actually the music rights cost more than the movie cost to make itself. Royalties can be pretty hefty. So he would film at night, and they made up the whole idea with the shutters being closed. And he would film it at night and then work during the day, so he barely got to really sleep. So, Clerks, pretty much two guys, Dante and Randall. Dante's more of the straight man. Randall's more of the comedy relief. I mean, they're both funny in their own ways, but Dante's a very uptight, very take anything he has in life seriously. But he is flawed as well. He works as a convenience store clerk, and his buddy Randall, who works next door at the video store, it shows pretty much a day in the life of them, and what they have to deal with on a constant basis, and how they talk about what they're going to do in the future, how their lives are now, various other things. Clerks is a very good movie. It definitely set the tone for the whole Askew-niverse. It is black and white, which I always thought was really cool. For a movie in the mid-90's, especially one of that caliber, to have that kind of quality to it. It makes it definitely look a little bit more serious, and it shows that it's definitely independently made. Clerks actually had a huge cult following. Miramax ended up releasing it in 1994, and it ended up jumping off from there. Good movie, very, very funny. It's just about talking. It feels very organic in how the day-to-day operations go, and it just seems like, when you're a teenager in your early 20s and you're spending like a summer day trying to have fun, and you get called into work. I mean, I personally, I feel that if I was in my early 20s and I got called into work and worked all day and had the events that happened to me, I actually think that it would be a very kind of a fun atmosphere. I mean, personally, myself, I'm more of a people person. However, I wouldn't be too keen on the fact of my ex-girlfriend fucking a dead guy in the bathroom. But other than that, very, very fun movie. First appearance of Jay and Silent Bob, played by Jason Mewes and Kevin Smith, respectively. The thing that I always liked about Kevin Smith in these movies is he never credits himself in the opening of the movie, which I always thought was really cool. Like, you'd see every single name of people that were in the movie, like the big main people in the movie, the ones that get top billing in the opening credits, and you would never see Kevin Smith's name because he seemed like somebody that was like, okay, I'm already directing, I'm already writing, I'm already helping produce this thing. Why do I need to put my name on there? I'm not going to put myself over any more than I need to. But he would always end up putting his name in the end credits just because he would put the full cast list. But that was one of the things I liked about Kevin Smith. He knew, and he was able to put himself over, but also realize, be like, hey, I'm already the director, I'm already the writer. Look at all these other people that are in my film. But Jay and Silent Bob, great characters. They would carry on through the rest of the View Askew-niverse, and definitely were the glue that held it all together, even in some films where they didn't make too much of an appearance. This film, they had a pretty big presence in, as well as the sequel, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. After Clerks, in 1995, the only View Askew-niverse film to be released by a huge studio. I believe it was one of the big studios at the time. Of course, I'm talking about Universal. Mallrats takes place a day before what happens in Clerks. It's about two guys, Brody Bruce, who's played by Jason Lee, and T.S. Quint, which is played by Jason London, who are at the mall, and they're both being dumped by their girlfriends. Claire Forlani plays Brandy, who is T.S.'s girlfriend, and then Brody's girlfriend, played by Shannon Doherty. It is funny because most of the time, I don't really remember her name. It's just like, I just think of Shannon Doherty. I'm actually going to look that up because it always bugs me, Let's see here. Renee. But I don't really ever remember referring to as Renee. I just like, oh, that's Shannon Doherty. Of course, you have Ethan Suplee confuse her as Brenda, which he replies with Dick, which I always thought was really funny. A little throwback to 90210 there. Mallrats is really cool. Pretty much what it is that Brandy, her father is played by Michael Rooker, before he got all huge in the 2000s. I would think at that point I had only seen him in Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, but he plays her father, and he's kind of an asshole, and of course T.S. isn't a fan of his either, but she breaks up with him right before he's about to bring her to Universal Studios so he can propose to her on the Jaws ride, right as the shark pops up. I know, that's so romantic. But pretty much what it is just Brody and T.S. hanging out at the mall. And I know a lot of us growing up used to think how cool was fucking hanging out at the mall. I mean, nowadays, not so much because you have the internet and you have some other things. I mean, granted, our mall isn't that great either. I mean, there's got some stuff keeping it afloat, but malls aren't really big anymore just because you have the surge in the internet and just people would prefer to shop there and get what they need rather than going to a store and be like, oh, we don't have what you want. I make my case there. So Mallrats is a pretty fun movie as well. It's a little bit more comedic than Clerks, a little bit more slapsticky. You have Jay and Silent Bob doing this very Wile E. Coyote kind of plot to destroy a dating show that Mr. Svenning has set up in the mall. That's a ripoff of the dating game. There was also some other cool things. Brian O'Halloran, who played Dante in Clerks, makes an appearance, but as a different version of the Hicks clan, which I actually thought his character was funny because what would end up happening is while they were having the dating show, Brody would just give him a whole bunch of shit. The plane incident and everything, and then I think his name was Grant in the movie, Grant Hicks, I think it was. And he was like, Jesus Christ, Grant, there's just some things you don't talk about in public. After he's talking about an almost plane crash where, people are jerking off because they think they're going to die. Probably one of my favorite parts. Another thing about these movies is that they're very, very quotable. They reference a lot of other things because Kevin Smith himself is a nerd, very much into comic books, and it shows. There's actually one part where Jay and Silent Bob are trying to get away from LaFours and the other security guards, and it was very reminiscent of the escape that Batman and Vicky Vale have in the 1989 Batman film. It's so much to the fact that Jay even does a little throwback line and says, "Where does he get those wonderful toys or beautiful toys?" or whatever it was. But yeah, that was always pretty funny. Another thing about these Kevin Smith movies that I liked is that yes, they did have various actors play more than one role in various movies. Like you would have, like I said, you would have Brian O'Halloran play both Dante Hicks in Clerks, and also he was Grant Hicks in Mallrats. That would continue on. You got Shannon Hamilton played by Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck would show up repeatedly in other View Askew-niverse movies as well as Joey Lauren Adams, who I will actually talk about with the next movie coming up as well. There's just, of course, Jason Lee. He was in other movies as well. Those three that I just mentioned are actually in the next film that I'm going to actually talk about. But Mallrats didn't do as well. See, Universal tried to capitalize on something that Miramax had, and we're just like, oh, well, we want to do this, but we want to change some things. Like Willem. Willem was played, I believe, by Scott Mosier in Clerks. I believe that could be right. Let's see here. Yeah, Scott Mosier was Willem, the snowball guy, as well as, some other people as well. But that's the one thing you always have. Walt Flanagan's another. He would play multiple roles in these movies, which I always thought was pretty nice. But yeah, Mallrats definitely set the tone for multiple people playing multiple roles in the series, but Universal wasn't really big on that. They decided not to cast Scott Mosier as Willem, and they cast Ethan Suplee. Ethan Suplee was pretty heavyset at the time, so you go from a skinny dude back to Ethan Suplee, and it's just a little different. Also, the characters were a little different. In Clerks, Willem is more like kind of stoned most of the time. In Mallrats, Willem's a little bit more angry, pissed off that he can't see the fucking sailboat or schooner, whatever it is. There's no Easter Bunny. So that was one thing that I always thought was a little weird. They actually didn't even want Jason Mewes to play Jay. I think they were talking about possibly going with Jim Brewer, which I'm glad that they didn't. Jason Mewes still had a audition, but I'm glad that they stuck with him. So moving on from Mallrats, Miramax ended up taking control back of the View Askew-niverse after that, and after that you would not see a major studio take control of the View Askew-niverse again. So 2 years after that, in 1997, they released Chasing Amy, which I think probably had to be one of the smartest and kind of least wacky films in the View Askew-niverse. It was just it seemed like it would be a little bit more in tune with real life. I think in terms of the movies that they ended up having, you have Clerks and Dogma. I think those were the ones that were less cartoony and just very much in tune with real life, because they talk about real world issues. You definitely have Jay and Silent Bob in Mallrats being a little cartoony. I mean, they weren't as much in Clerks, but Chasing Amy is back where it belongs. So Chasing Amy, you have this guy, Holden McNeil, played by Ben Affleck, and he is a comic book writer, and then you have Banky Edwards, who's the inker, or the tracer, whatever you want to call it. They work on this cartoon comic book that's based off of Jay and Silent Bob called Blunt Man and Chronic. And what happens is Holden falls in love with a woman named Alyssa Jones, and Banky is actually homophobic, and it turns out that Alyssa is actually a lesbian. So it pretty much just talks about their relationship, how they go through life, and what happens before, during, and after the relationship is over. Very, very smart film. It talks about a lot of issues that people have with sexuality and things of that sort. But it's a very, very smart, very good movie. It doesn't end the way that a lot of people think it would. It ends in a very adult way, a very smart way. One of the things that I always thought was a little weird is that they refer Alyssa Jones refers to having sex with Shannon Hamilton and him videotaping it, and then earlier on in Mallrats, actually Shannon Hamilton has sex with Alyssa's sister, Trisha, and videotapes it as well. Having sex somewhere very uncomfortable, and no, it was not the back of a Volkswagen. But Chasing Amy is very, very good. You have other characters that are introduced to the series that are just very, very cool. One that I really like that doesn't really show up a lot later on in the series, probably only shows up, well, the actor shows up a couple more times in the series, but the role that is Hooper X, who is a kind of like a Black Pantherish, kind of like a comic book writer. He's definitely more acting than anything, but he's a gay man, and that also goes in through him and Holden and Banky have a kind of unique kind of relationship as well, and that comes into play later on in the movie. It talks a lot of things about sexuality and how comfortable people are with each other, and really just how that whole dynamic can work, of course, in the mid to late 90s, when that was still something that wasn't universally accepted. I mean, granted, it's not universally accepted now, but it was just something that was different at the time. But Chasing Amy, definitely great. All these films that I will talk about in the View Askew-niverse, they're all great in one way or another. And they all deal with different things. So 2 years after that, Dogma was released 2 years ago, and 2 years after Chasing Amy in 1999. And I would have to say Dogma is also a smart film as well. It's a little bit wacky. It definitely delves into kind of like the Mallrats kind of theme. But Dogma is really all about religion. It's about two angels that are cast out of heaven, played by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, and they are trying to find a way back into heaven, but if they do, they will negate all existence and the world will end. So pretty much what it is that they have the last scion, who's played by Linda Fiorentino. She teams up with Jay and Silent Bob, and also, of course, the 13th Apostle, who is played by Chris Rock. There's a lot of people in this movie. You got Alan Rickman, who's the Metatron. He is the voice of God, because God's voice is so powerful, and if God were to speak, everything would be destroyed in existence around it. And there was also a cool cameo. I'm not going to say who it was that plays God, but it's a very neat little thing that they end up doing. But there's other people that are also in the movie that make appearances. There's a lot of cameos, a lot of different roles. You have George Carlin playing a cardinal, and he's starting the Catholicism wow movement with the iconic Buddy Christ statue, which if none of you guys have seen the Buddy Christ statue, definitely look it up. Jesus didn't come here to give us the willies. He came here to party. He was a cool guy, and they show that with the Catholicism wow movement. But Dogma was cool. It talks a lot about different things with religion, and it did stir up quite a bit of controversy when it came out. A lot of these films did. I mean, Clerks was well known for having a lot of foul language, and it actually got an NC-17 at one point, and Kevin Smith actually had to try to appeal it, and it got turned over. But it was weird that they got an NC-17 just for language, which I think is weird. They talk about it in his battle with the MPAA, and the documentary This Film Is Not Your Rated, which talks all about the MPAA and the things that they have gone through. Like they talk about certain things, like with why Orgasmo, the Trey Parker film, got an NC-17 rating when you actually see nothing really just like nothing really sexual about it. I mean, you see a few butts here and there, but there's like no graphic nudity. There's no, just the overall tone of the film they gave it to, and a lot of people thought that was a little ridiculous. But Kevin Smith has gone on to say that he's probably had issues with the MPAA for every single one of his films, even ones that didn't have to do with the Askew-niverse. And this is definitely one that he had issues with as well, because a lot of people in the MPAA were very conservative. I mean, they still are. But this is also one that he had a lot of controversy with. Dogma was actually released by Lionsgate Films in '99. I don't know why Miramax didn't pick it up. I don't know if the Weinsteins were really offended by the whole religion thing. I mean, they seem to have enough of their own problems nowadays, but enough about that. But Dogma is kind of a satire on how people treat religion from all sides. Everything's really discussed, and they really make fun of everything. So yeah, that's Dogma. Dogma was a little bit more quieter. It wasn't. I don't think it was as big as the other ones, but it's still an enjoyable movie. Very humorous. Very different things going on with it. So now we come into the 2000s. The 2000s are a little bit more, there are two films that are a part of the Askew-niverse that are definitely a little bit more slapsticky and wacky than other ones. First up, we have Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. This is Jay and Silent Bob as main characters in their first movie of the Askew-niverse. At the time, they were mainly just supporting characters. Clerks, they were supporting characters to Dante and Randall. Mallrats, they were supporting characters to T.S. and Brody. Chasing Amy, they actually only had one scene in the film. One scene where they're talking about stuff with Holden about his relationship with Joey Lauren Adams' character. And that's the only time you see them in the whole movie. Dogma, they're also supporting characters. And Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back is the only film in the series, unless if you go by Kevin Smith wanting to reboot the series. Well, not really reboot the series, but it's called Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. And if you would believe that is going to come out, then that would be their second movie as lead characters. So Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back is about Jay and Silent Bob, and pretty much it's a road trip film. They try to go to Hollywood because somebody's trying to make a Blunt Man and Chronic movie, and they want to get their motherfucking movie check, as they say, because they didn't even know it was being made, and also because all these nerds were talking shit about the movie, and knowing how Jay and Silent Bob are, they tried to stop the movie from being made. There are probably more cameos and more stars in this movie than anything else in the Askew-niverse. If you look it up on Wikipedia or on IMDb, you will find nothing but names. Just high-class A-listers, B-listers, C-listers, whatever you want to call it. There are a lot of people in this movie. It's like an all-star cast. There were a lot of favorites of mine. Will Ferrell as the park ranger, before he got huge, is a very good character, probably one of my favorites. My favorite scene has to be when Jay and Silent Bob are tricking the police while they're at the diner with the monkey, and Judd Nelson plays a sheriff of the area, and they're arguing over whether or not to let Jay and Silent Bob go, because Jay and Silent Bob try to disguise themselves as a gay couple and the monkey is their kid, and Judd Nelson's more serious, and Will Ferrell is just trying to be more a little bit more PC, and he talks about how he doesn't want the liberal media to get a hold of the situation if they don't let the gay couple and their son go. And then Judd Nelson's like, can't you see what's going on around here? And then, of course, Will Ferrell's like, the only thing I see is a political fiasco that I'm willing to avoid by letting this butt-fucking Brady Bunch go, which probably has to be one of my favorite lines in the whole movie. But the movie's very goofy, very slapsticky, very comedic. Definitely probably in my top of the film series, just because it's just so funny. The plot is so ridiculous, and there's a lot of good references, a lot of good cameos. Jay tries to go down on a nun, played by Carrie Fisher, which I always thought was funny because George Carlin plays a hitchhiker that's willing to go down on truck drivers for a ride, because it's the first rule of the unwritten book of laws of the road. Wait, no. I'm trying to say the first rule in the book. The book of what? The book of the road. There we go. So Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back came out in 2001. Funny movie. And that was actually when I got to hear the song Because I Got High by Afro Man for the first time. Just very goofy movie. After that, they waited about 5 years until they came out with another movie, and this was Clerks 2. And it takes place about 10 years after. Dante and Randall are now working at a fast food restaurant called Moobies. Moobies you might remember from Dogma, Dogma and from Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. But what happened, Randall accidentally burns down the quick stop by leaving the coffee pot on, and him and Dante are forced to get jobs at a Moobies. There are other characters in this. There was Elias, who is a kind of a very weird, very religious character. He's a teenager, very, very just weird overall. Rosario Dawson plays Becky, who is the person that runs Moobies, and also that person that Dante has a little bit of a past with. And it just talks about the day that they have, being that it's Dante's last day at Moobies before he moves down to Florida with his fiance, played by Kevin Smith's real life wife, Jennifer Schwalb. I think it's Schwalbach. I think that's how you pronounce her name. But it's very cool all around. It's more comedic than the first one was. It's not as serious. It does talk about life, but there are also some ridiculous things that I never would have thought I would have seen, having seen the first movie. You'll see all about it if you guys have seen it. If you haven't seen it, I'm not going to ruin it for you, because I think the things that happen in Clerks 2 are just something that you can't spoil for people. If they don't know, they shouldn't know until they see it. It is just that ridiculous. And Clerks 2 at the time was actually the last film in the Askew-niverse. I mean, I believe so. But there were other talks to do other ones. Like, they were thinking about doing a Mallrats 2. They were thinking about doing a Clerks 3. But Jeffrey Anderson, unfortunately, did not want to do it. But they're working on the Jay and Silent Bob reboot movie. And they're talking about having Miramax do it. And pretty much is that they just want to stop a reboot film of Blunt Man and Chronic from happening. Might be a little bit different than Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Might not be, but I mean, I guess we'll see what happens. I know he's going through some stuff right now with his heart attack and whatnot. But yeah, it's all Miramax is a different company now since the Weinsteins left back in 2005 or 2004 from Miramax and started the Weinstein Company, which will no longer be the Weinstein Company after the big scandal that happened with Harvey last fall with all the assault and harassment allegations. So yeah, Clerks 2 was the last film of this series so far, and it was released by the Weinstein Company. So the Weinsteins pretty much had everything to do, I think, save for Dogma and Mallrats with the series. They had a little bit of falling out, Kevin Smith and Harvey Weinstein did, after Zack and Miri, which is not part of the Askew-niverse, but is a great film of his, after it didn't do so well, and they had a little bit of a falling out because of marketing and all that other stuff. But then again, you have a movie called Zack and Miri Make a Porno, and it's going to be a little bit hard to really market that to people. Some people actually market it as Zack and Miri. I think every single DVD at Walmart now that was there of that film just says Zack and Miri. Pretty much all the commercials said Zack and Miri when it was on different channels that they didn't want advertisement for the film with the word porno in it. I know some of the posters weren't allowed. I actually have a banned poster of the movie myself on my wall. But it's the MPAA, of course. You can imagine they try to slap the NC-17 on that as well, and they were able to appeal it, but it was just very risky. So yeah, those are the list of the Askew-niverse movies. They're all favorites of mine, but if I had to rank them, I would say I would put... They're all very, very, very special to me. It's hard to rank a series like this, just because there's so much variety in all of them. I'm not going to say that, like, I can't put what's at the bottom of the list as the worst, because they're all funny. They're all very, very, very funny. I would have to say, in terms of rank, I would put Chasing Amy down at I don't want to say the last spot. I would rank it first. Like, I would rank it first in the list, and then each movie that I work my way up on can be above it. Not to say that these are bad movies. They are great movies. I love them. They're very near and dear to my heart. But I would have to say that Chasing Amy would be ranked first. And then after that, I would say Dogma. And then Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. After that, Mallrats. And then, of course, I put Clerks 1 and 2 at the top. I would kind of think of what made me laugh more. And I would have to say Clerks 2 made me laugh more, because I didn't think that I would be able to laugh as much at the second one as I did the first one. And I was pleasantly surprised at how wrong they proved me to be. So I definitely like Clerks 2 a little bit more than Clerks 1. It's just because the crazy stuff that goes on, the shit that they talk about, just the events that happen overall in the movie are just very, 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 very funny. The sexy stud probably had to add to that. Like I said, I ain't gonna spoil that for nobody. If you haven't seen Clerks 2, definitely see the first one and then see Clerks 2. Two very different movies, both of them, but they still have the same kind of heart, but they're very fun. So that was my list of the Askew-niverse and what I thought of them and what I liked the most about them. I plan on doing more episodes of this podcast. I know this one wasn't as long, but it's because I just had that material to work on, and I'm a one man here. I'm only doing this on my own. But if anybody that's listening to this, if you guys would ever want to be on the 90s Nut and talk to me about certain things, I would absolutely love that. I've been thinking about a couple different formats to do and how to do them. I'm still working my way around doing this whole podcast thing. It's a very new thing for me. But I like doing it. I like talking to people. I like connecting with people about these things. They're just very, 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 very fun to do. And it definitely gets me to nerd out a little bit. So if you guys can think of any ideas of stuff that you want me to talk about in a future episode, if you guys want to be part of an extra episode, let me know. You guys can like, comment, subscribe to these videos that I'm going to be putting out, because I will be putting these as a video. I'm not working on putting them on any podcastings yet, just because I'm not at that point yet. But I will be putting this on the Facebook page, which is the 90's Nut. I will be putting it on YouTube. I'm trying to work my way on what the best podcast channel would be. I heard Stitcher's good. I've been hearing about some other ones, but I will be working on that. What I was going to talk about next time on the 90's Nut, though, it was something that was always fun for all of us kids growing up in the 90s, and that, of course, was SNICK. Saturday Night Nickelodeon, the 2-hour block from 8 to 10, where they had all of our favorite shows. I'll go over to them. If anybody wants to talk to me about them, be a part of that episode, let me know, and we'll see what we can do from there. So like I said, my name is Lance Mado. I'm just a nerd trying to reinvent the American dream. And I hope you guys have a great day. And I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this first episode of the 90s Nut. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.